I think, sometimes people hear purple teaming and they think it's, one person who's handling both the offensive and defensive side of things. And if we use an analogy like chess, that's like playing chess against yourself and you already know what your next move's going to be. It's more about blending these skills together into a single unified team where you have people who can be subject matter experts in both and understand as well the other side of it. But when you're running through these exercises, you don't want to be playing chess against yourself. That's not very fun or effective.
Hello and welcome to the Cisco Learning Network podcast. That's Kyle Winters, a technical advocate at Cisco focused on security. In this episode, Kyle joins Cisco Learning Network Community Manager Matt Saunders and lead tech advocate Kareem Iskander to discuss what the deal is with Purple Team, a collaborative cybersecurity methodology that combines red and blue teams to improve an organization's security posture. Together, Matt, Kyle, and Kareem discuss how the Purple Team ideology improves approaches to cybersecurity by enhancing CyberOps team skills, and also how you can improve your own skills and understanding of cybersecurity in general by adopting these principles and by visiting the Cisco U and Cisco NetAcad, or Networking Academy, for more resources. Matt and Kareem kick things off by welcoming Kyle, our first guest for the What's the Deal With series.
We have our first guest ever for our What's the Deal With podcast series.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever done this, so I'm pleased to have Kyle join us. Kyle Winters, he is an advocate on my team. He's leading us from a security perspective. We're talking about purple teaming. Kyle, if you want to give our audience a quick introduction and just tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, it's great to be here. My name is Kyle Winters. I'm based in Irvine, California. And like you said, I am a technical advocate at Cisco focused on security. So I've got a lot of background in network security, application security, worked with many different companies, and I'm happy to kind of share and evangelize security and Cisco technologies across the board.
It's good to have you on, Kyle.
It's great to be here.
So for this episode, we're going to talk about something that's new to me. I don't know, Kareem, how new it is to you and then to our listeners. But cybersecurity, always there's been, the red team and the blue team. And I've got my head pretty well wrapped around those two, the concept and the ideas of what those two teams represent and what they do. This new, for myself, new to me terminology and concept is the concept of a purple team as well. Kareem, how familiar are you with purple teaming?
I'm somewhat familiar, not as familiar probably as Kyle is. For me, Cisco and here at Learning and Certification with our CyberOps certification track, we've always been talking about blue teaming. And the industry has also shifted a little bit where it's also focused on the offense as opposed to the defense. And so the concept of merging those together is what, to my understanding, and I'm sure there's more depth to it than that, is purple teaming. But perhaps, having Kyle here, the expert, to talk to us a little bit. Kyle, just tell us what is really purple teaming and how does it differ from red and blue? I feel like we're talking about the Matrix here, blue pill, red pill.
But before you start, we have to pitch it the right way. We've got to set up the question with our format, right? What's the deal
with purple teaming?
So purple teaming and red team and blue team, this terminology has its roots in military exercises and vernacular. So red would typically represent the enemy, blue would represent the defensive side of things. And this model was brought into cybersecurity where red teams would simulate attacks and blue teams would defend against them. But for a long time, these teams would work separately, which often led to communication gaps and missed chances to improve overall security. I think there's a really good quote from The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and that is, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. And if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So this, I think, really gets at the heart of purple teaming. It ultimately tries to flip the red versus blue team model by encouraging collaboration instead of keeping these teams separate. So traditionally, red teams would simulate attacks, like I said, blue defends against them. But when these teams join forces, they gain a better understanding of the attacker's playbooks and the organization's defenses. So it's all about knowing how the enemy thinks and how to counter their moves. So instead of these teams operating in isolation, Purple Team encourages them to work together during these exercises. So Red Team simulating the attacks and then immediately sharing what they did with Blue Teams, who can then adjust their defenses in real time. I think the goal is really to create a feedback loop where both teams are learning as they go. You're able to identify vulnerabilities more quickly that way and improve the overall security posture of the organization.
That makes a lot of sense, Kyle, from kind of a military perspective. What does that framework look like when we're talking about cybersecurity?
So there are definitely some key objectives in that framework that you ultimately want to lead to overall better security posture. So first, it's about improving the communication between red and blue teams. So when these teams work separately, important insights often get lost. So purple teaming encourages collaboration so that both teams are always on the same page and sharing information in real time. Another goal of the framework is to strengthen, obviously, the organization's security posture. So by having the red team simulate attacks and immediately sharing how they did it, the blue team can then improve defenses on the spot. So that continuous feedback loop really helps to identify vulnerabilities faster and patch them before they can be exploited in the real world. It's also about fostering a culture of continuous learning. So cyber threats are constantly evolving, so both teams need to stay sharp and adapt their strategies. Purple teaming ensures that both red and blue teams are always learning from each other, testing new tactics and improving their skills, which will make the organization's security posture more resilient over time.
And so, Kyle, when you talk about the framework for the way that the purple team kind of works and interacts with the red team and the blue team, dig into that just a touch for me, if you don't mind. What does that look like kind of specifically? What are those kind of day-to-day job role functions and the skills that go along with those job role functions, to support the executing that job well? What does that really look like? If I'm the purple team guy, you can be the blue team guy. Kareem, you're going to be the red team guy. What do I do? You do the thing, and then what do I do?
I think, is it even divided into that? This is actually a really good question, Matt, to find out what's the deal with. Is the purple team an actual team that's a third to the blue and red, Kyle? Or are we talking about basically transferable skills? So you only have a blue team and you only have a red team, but what you're doing is creating this kind of hybrid model where the red team has blue skills and the blue team has red skills. That would actually clarify it to me, and probably a lot of our audience have this similar question.
Yeah, so in the traditional sense, the red and the blue teams would operate separately in silos. And this would lead to missed opportunities and missed chances to improve the overall security posture because there's inherently a competitive nature between these two teams. And it ultimately doesn't benefit the organization and the security posture when these two teams are trying to best each other at the expense of the other. So in the purple team model, really it's about having these teams work together. They can often operate in a single team, and it could oftentimes be people who have both sets of skills, but you really want to make sure that you have the right people with the right skills as well too. You can't have somebody driving an offensive security effort without any offensive security experience or skills. Same on the defensive side as well too. So many times purple teams incorporate a hybrid mix of these two components, having people with strong blue team experience and strong red team experience and working together in a collaborative environment. Obviously, if you're limited on resources, which is a common challenge as well today too, it helps to have people who can have both sets of skills. But if you are a larger organization, having these two areas of focus working together is really what purple teaming is about, having that essentially a unified effort, a unified front to improve the overall security posture of an organization.
Okay, so let's talk about it from a technical perspective now. Kyle, tell us a little bit about maybe also from a Cisco perspective and adjacent technologies that are involved in this. What are some of the skills from a technology perspective that's needed for a red team to be more purple and a blue team to go towards the red and be more purple on that side?
Yeah, so let's start with just kind of a simplified example of what that day-to-day might look like, and then we'll kind of go into those tools and skills. So let's say the red team, they simulate a phishing attack by crafting what looks like a realistic email, and it's designed to trick employees into clicking a malicious link. The goal is to see how well the blue team detects this as the attack unfolds. So as the email campaign is launched, the blue team is monitoring email traffic, employee reports, different logs to see if they can identify any signs of that phishing attempt. Once the attack is complete, both of those teams oftentimes come together to debrief as well. That's that collaborative nature of purple teaming, where the red team would explain the tactics that they used, how they crafted the phishing email, how many employees fell for it, and how they were able to bypass certain defenses that the blue team might have already had in place. Meanwhile, the blue team shares what their strategies were for detection, how they spotted and what they spotted during this attack, and how they responded. So ultimately, an exercise like this gives both teams valuable insights because the red team gets feedback on the effectiveness of their attack methods, while the blue team learns how to better recognize and respond to those phishing attempts. So this creates that continuous learning process where both teams are improving their skills with each exercise. Now, going to the topic of skills and tools. So some of the tools and techniques that are commonly used, obviously from a blue team perspective, it's really about incident response and detection in these different types of activities, as well as making sure that you have the right defensive mechanisms in place. Cisco obviously has a ton of technology that very heavily aligns with blue team efforts. So things like XDR is an example to be able to have visibility across the entire security environment of an organization and help you detect and respond to threats faster.
XDR, or Extended Detection and Response, is a unified security incident platform. Using AI and automation, it provides organizations with the holistic, efficient way to protect against and respond to advanced cyber attacks. XDR platforms help enterprises expand their coverage to protect against more sophisticated types of cyber attacks through detection, investigation, and response capabilities.
Splunk's another great example that can give powerful analytics, not just to the incident response and blue team side of things, but also the red team side to see how their attacks are unfolding and be able to dive into the analytics and data that's driven through this process. For the red team, it's really about that ethical hacking and penetration testing and really following through an attack kill chain from start to finish. A common toolkit that is used is Kali Linux, and that has a ton of capabilities included in that align with things like the MITRE ATT&CK framework as an example that really give you essentially a step-by-step formula to conduct different attacks and have these exploits available very easily and readily available to use. So having the ability to not just leverage these tools, but understand the flow of a modern attack and how to connect the dots between these different tools. For example, Nmap being one of them to scan the networks, but then what do you do with that once you have a topology of a network that you want to infiltrate? Being able to connect that all the way from reconnaissance all the way to things like command and control and exfiltration are really where the red team skills come in.
That makes a lot of sense. Whenever you talk about Red Team, for some reason, I don't know about you guys, but I think of Mr. Robot. Have you seen this show?
Mr. Robot follows Elliot, an antisocial programmer who works as a cybersecurity engineer during the day and a vigilante hacker at night. He gets recruited by a mysterious group of underground hackers to join their organization to help bring down corporate America. It really is a great show.
I'm actually watching it again right now. That's a great show just to show both the red and blue team sides of it. In a way, you can see Elliot, the main character of the show, as almost a purple team in himself. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but by day he's working on the defensive side for a large corporation, and at night he's performing hacking processes. So it's a great show, and a lot of the terminology and the types of attacks that unfold in that show are pretty realistic and mimic real world scenarios.
And I know, like realistically speaking, outside of Hollywood, Cisco has been doing a lot of work on security. I think just based on our reports, security is a huge contributor to Cisco revenue and what we're doing with the technology in general. I don't think it's focused on purple teaming much, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong. Can you tell us a little bit about just some common challenges and pitfalls of when organizations decide to take that purple teaming model or implement it, I should say?
So there are definitely some common challenges and hurdles that many teams that are trying to implement purple teaming encounter. One of the biggest is resistance between red and blue teams. So since they're traditionally used to working independently and often see things from different perspectives, it can take time to build that trust and collaboration between them. It's important not to create a competitive atmosphere between these two teams. Really, you want to have a little bit of friendly competition because that can be motivating, but it shouldn't interfere with the collaborative nature of purple teaming, because ultimately the goal is for both teams to learn from each other, not to win at the expense of the other. One pitfall I also see is relying too heavily on automation. Automation is obviously very important these days and is definitely steering the conversation and the technology in that direction. But while tools like AI can make purple team exercises more efficient, they shouldn't replace that human element. Both teams need to stay engaged through the process and use their judgment and creativity to find solutions as these exercises unfold. There's obviously a challenge as well, too, of lack of resources or time to properly conduct these exercises. It can take time and require skilled personnel that many organizations might not have on hand. And obviously, a lot of people are stretched thin on their day-to-day operations today. But ultimately, it's important to make the time for these exercises because it drives towards that goal of improving your overall security posture, and it feeds into that continuous learning, continuous iteration loop. So ultimately, you want to make sure as well that you're aligning on the goals between these two teams as they work together, because they have different priorities. So, red team wants to find as many vulnerabilities as possible. Blue team wants to focus on protecting and stopping them. But without that clear communication and common objectives, it's easy for those teams to end up working against each other. So, as teams and organizations go through building these purple team efforts, it's important to remember that it's an ongoing effort. It's not a one and done thing. And it's a continuous process of iteration and improvement. So work on regular exercises, make the time for them, have a little bit of competitiveness to motivate, but remember that both of these different functions are on the same team and driving towards the same mission, which is to improve the overall security posture of your business for the long run.
So Kyle, as I've been listening to you and Kareem chat here, it's been super enlightening for myself. Like I was kind of mentioning earlier, I was envisioning a purple team as like a new singular job role within an organization. I was envisioning it almost like a project manager. Okay, great. Red team, you did your thing. Blue team, you're doing your thing. Let me gather your notes and documentation together and read them back out to the separate teams. I'll take the blue team and then read out to the red team, and I'll take the red team. But it sounds like it's not quite that. It's more of a blending of skill sets.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I think, sometimes people hear purple teaming and they think it's, one person who's handling both the offensive and defensive side of things. And if we use an analogy like chess, that's like playing chess against yourself and you already know what your next move's going to be. It's more about blending these skills together into a single unified team where you have people who can be subject matter experts in both and understand as well the other side of it. But when you're running through these exercises, you don't want to be playing chess against yourself. That's not very fun or effective. Really, it's blending of these skills into that single unified team where you have that culture of continuous learning and collaboration that allows you to strengthen your resiliency over time.
It sounds more to me like a cultural shift with the crossing of skill sets as opposed to a new job role, really, because it's been siloed, right? You're always either on the blue side or the red side, and you're offense or defense, right? But now you're saying you have to think, if you're on the red team, you have to think like a blue team and vice versa. And that takes more of a human cultural change as opposed to actual skill sets, because I feel like the skill sets in a security engineer are somewhat transferable. You know the core, you understand security, you understand how to configure things, how to use the tools and analytics that you have to make decisions, or how to automate. But then you got to think of it from the other side while you're doing it. And I think that's more of a cultural change, I feel.
Absolutely. And, to go back to that quote from The Art of War, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. And that's really what this collaborative nature of purple teaming is trying to foster. If these teams are operating in silos, like in a traditional sense, you're missing out the opportunity to know the other side and understand how they operate and understand how they might penetrate the defenses, or if you're on the other side of it, how they might defend against your attacks. So really it's about creating that culture of collaboration and continuous learning where these teams can work together to break down those silos, understand each other better, and drive for that ultimate improvement that you're working towards.
And yet at the same time, though, in order to achieve that, I feel like, and it sounds like, there is some cross-skilling very specifically that also need to take place in order to help facilitate that cultural shift. Is that fair? I heard you mention specifically ethical hacking earlier, right? Like taking an ethical hacker approach. Would it be fair to say basically one of the things that, would need to occur is for maybe blue team members to add on the skill set of ethical hacking?
Absolutely. I think ethical hacking training is incredibly important for cybersecurity professionals, especially in that purple team context. The ability to think like an attacker is not just what allows red teams to be effective when they simulate real world threats, but it allows for blue teams to better understand the mindset of an attacker and the processes that they use so they can prepare their defenses in a much better way. This training can really be valuable for both sides of it. And one of the things that Cisco is doing to help traditional blue team members and defensive security folks understand the offensive side of things is by introducing a ethical hacking certificate that will be available through Cisco U and Net Academy. So this program is going to cover everything from penetration testing to vulnerability analysis and give professionals hands-on experience that they need to be effective in both red and blue team roles. One of the cool things about it as well is that after you complete the course, you can access capture the flag type challenges that are going to be available on Cisco U as well that give you practical hands-on experience working through real-world simulated attacks.
A link to those challenges that Kyle just mentioned, which are available on Cisco U, can be found in the description of this episode. And if you haven't heard of Cisco U, it's a digital learning experience built around the user that guides learners and teams to their tech learning goals. Currently, there are 2 Capture the Flag challenges, DNS Event and Wireshark Foo. Access the link in the description of this episode to find out more.
So really, this training can be very valuable in building a skilled and adaptable purple team that's capable of not just simulating attacks, but defending against a wide range of attacks as well.
That's super interesting to me too, because a bit of a misconception that I've been holding this whole time, understanding this new ethical hacker offering from us, is that it was almost exclusively geared towards new people coming into a career, right? A career in cybersecurity. I'm kind of new, building up some skill sets initially early on in career. And so ethical hacker course path option is a great option for me to, establish my skill sets. I think that's still true. Yet, and also, it sounds like what we're saying too is for the seasoned security administration, security engineer, professional, to start to add on a skill set like ethical hacking, to start to bring that purple team culture into their organization is also the recommended kind of path and solution for those folks as well. Is that fair? Is that about accurate?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Something that somebody with entry level or no experience can jump in and learn these different types of skills. But it's also incredibly valuable for the seasoned vet who's traditionally focused on the defensive side of things to better understand what their enemy on the offensive side might be doing. So it's incredibly valuable to have both sets of skills, in my opinion. And it's something that anybody can jump in and start learning. So it's, obviously offensive. It tends to be considered more exciting by people who don't have a lot of experience in cybersecurity. Right. So it's a great entryway into understanding cybersecurity and how it works. But for that seasoned veteran, it's incredibly valuable as well too, to hone in on your skills and refine them and better understand the other side of the picture. So that way you can be more prepared to understand what they're going to do and adapt to that better.
It really reminds me of like the journey of like the DevNet world, right? Where we took traditional network engineers and where the job skills were previously segmented of you're a network engineer and you're a programmer, sit in your different floors of the office building and do your work separately. And we took that and we blended that together. We blended those skill sets together for both sides, for both the engineers and the developers. And we kind of formed like a little bit of a hybrid kind of a role, basically. We didn't form it, but we helped to facilitate and kind of, put structure around that. It really kind of reminds me of that same paradigm.
I think to a certain degree that could apply. Ultimately, one thing just to iterate on is that the efforts of purple teaming and being able to have a dual skill set approach to it isn't necessarily about giving yourself more work and responsibilities. It's about really understanding the other side of the picture and how these can work together to drive towards what your ultimate goals are, which from a security perspective, it's really about building a stronger security posture for your organization.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you, Kyle. That makes perfect sense.
I'm listening to you talk. It sounds like there are a lot of skill sets, right, that you require. We are in learning and certification. We have an awesome community. CLN is one of them, and that we post these podcasts on. But could you give us a little bit of, for our listeners here, a little bit of information on, okay, how do I get my journey going on becoming more purple? What are some resources I have out there that I could start with? Kyle, you mentioned XDR, you mentioned Splunk, you talked about ethical hacking. As somebody that's listening, where can I get started with all of this?
So a great place to start is Cisco U. That's u.cisco.com. We have a ton of content available on there, especially geared towards the more defensive side of things. That includes full learning paths that will take you through things like cyber ops as a concept and driving into the weeds of how do you defend an organization and operate inside of a security operations center. We have a lot of different tutorials that are out there as well too that are free for people to leverage on the Cisco U platform. And some of those also cover offensive security as well too, like how do you perform network reconnaissance using Nmap, or how do you conduct an ARP spoofing attack? So there's a lot of resources that are available there. We also have NetAcad that's available. That's the Cisco Networking Academy, and you can access that at netacad.com. And on there, we have a free end-to-end ethical hacking course as well too, that at the end of it, it not only unlocks the capture the flag challenges that will be available in Cisco U, but it also gives you a ethical hacking certificate from Cisco that showcases your knowledge and skills in ethical hacking. So that's also a great resource that's available to you. Between Cisco U and NetAcad, you can find a lot of great information and really hone in and improve those skills.
Cool. I'm excited for the capture the flag activities in Cisco U. I think that's going to bring a lot of fun to the environment in a bit of a new way for us. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see how the community takes that on.
Yeah, if you've attended Cisco Live before, you've seen capture the flag activities that go on there. This is going to be very similar to that. We're introducing 2 capture the flag activities at the start, and every 9 weeks or so, we're going to introduce more as well. So expect to keep coming back and seeing new capture the flag challenges that you can participate in regularly.
And maybe our listeners can tell us a little bit on what challenges, once they check it out, what challenges do they want to see from us? Because we can make it happen.
Absolutely. We're all about continuous learning and improving here as well at Cisco. So the feedback from our community is valuable in making sure that we get you the content and information that you need to be as successful as possible in your roles.
And one of the steps in the capture the flag, I think it made it in scope. Kareem, you keep me honest if I'm wrong, but my Power Smoothies for Network Engineers side hustle link, that's one of the steps required, right, to visit that website?
Absolutely. I'm like, what's in the Power Smoothie?
Well, it depends on, your personal preferences. We have all organic and natural vegan recipes. Or, we have pure fruit heavy recipes. But really, it's all about making sure the network engineers get their protein throughout the day.
I think you need a purple team shake that kind of blends these all together.
That's going to be a great feedback question for the community. Let us know when you listen to the episode over on the Cisco Learning Network, when we share a little thread here, what ingredients and components would make up the purple team smoothie.
That's awesome. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being our first guest on What's the Deal With. Hopefully we get great feedback and we invite you back on this on another episode. Thank you for your time.
It's been great being here. I really appreciate it. Definitely check out some of the new tutorials that are coming out on Cisco U as well. And I'm always happy to hear any feedback that the community has and learn what types of things you want us to work on next. So thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to being back again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. You definitely helped to clarify a lot of things in my head personally. So hopefully a lot of the listeners also feel the same way. All right, Kareem, that's our first guest for What's the Deal With. Kyle set the bar pretty high, so our subsequent guests will have something to achieve to.
That's it for our episode on What's the Deal with Purple Team. For more information on Red Team, Blue Team, Purple Team, and cybersecurity in general, please visit the Cisco Learning Network at learningnetwork.cisco.com. There you can find all kinds of resources like training videos, study guides, and an entire community ready to help support you in your learning journey. And please subscribe to the Cisco Learning Network podcast to hear more news about the evolving world of Cisco certifications and to hear stories about others in their certification journeys. Thanks for listening.